As I said before, I'm not Josh Reeves, and we made this deal to do this sort of at the last minute. So I looked at his title. I said, Ancient Wisdom. I sort of liked that. So I thought about how I was going to do it. So I figured I'd talk about the ancient Greek thought, and especially because the works of Plato had so much influence on Ernest Holmes. And so what do we get from these old Greek philosophers? And actually in a new thought, and I'm going to bring to you things that you see every day in this church and in every new thought church. So Plato brought to us in his writings the concept of the good, the goodness within. He brought to us the concept of the one, the unitive mind that everything originates from. The concept of the light, which we use in so many of our meditations. The concept of beauty, which is associated with the good and the one and the light. And then when you focus on these things, he brings us the concept of providence, which we think of as just out-picturing when we focus on the right thing. Like you always hear me say, at least one time when I talk to you on Sunday, is the secret is just remembering who we truly are. And when we do that, the out-picturing just naturally occurs. And so Plato's philosophy, and this Platonic philosophy, changed the way of thinking. And sometimes it's been criticized as being one-sided because it doesn't, back in and before Plato, the old Jewish traditions, they had laws there, but the laws were good and bad. You saw good and bad stuff. And Plato's tradition focused on the one, the light, the good, focus on the light and create that in your life. Sort of sounds a lot like our affirmation and a lot what we teach in our classes. So, to understand Plato, you have to understand the people. Like I always studied Ernest Holmes to see where he got his stuff from. And for Plato, people came before Plato. And I want to go back to the first great philosopher, Parmenides. And so the history behind it was Parmenides trained Socrates. Socrates trained Plato, and Plato trained Aristotle. And so Parmenides lived around 500 before the Common Era. And all that we have for him, he wrote one long poem called On Nature, and all that we have is fragments, like 160 lines. But in the circle of scholars, he is revered both from the ancient scholars and from the people that study today. And so from these little bit of writings, he gave much of our cosmology, or how we see ourselves in the world, and much of our metaphysics. And this all came from so many years ago. And he's not the easiest read. And so he had a great statement that we talk about today. He answered the question, what's most important, being or becoming? And being is that which always is, that which is changeless. It's in other traditions too, but that which is changeless, we think of it as spirit. When we say God is all there is, that's the originating part. And becoming is that which changes, that which is never going to last forever. And if we look around in this room, all this would qualify as that becoming part. And so he argued himself to a point that being is what is the causal agent for everything that exists in reality. And there's a tantalizing tale he tells where he takes a journey to see a goddess, and it's actually a pretty good read. And he gives being 4 qualities. And these are primarily quotes from Parmenides, and I'll try and relate to them, how we use them today. So the first one is, there remains but one word by which to express the true road, and that road is that it is. And in this road there are many signs that what is has no beginning and will never be destroyed. It is whole, still, and without end. So it sounds a lot like whole, perfect, and complete that some church says a lot, right? And the second quality he tells us that being could not be something of the future because there could not exist a time when it is not. So somewhere I've heard the concept of the ever-present now. Maybe in classes we've talked a little bit about that. It's not the past or the future, it's now. This was 2,500 years ago this was put out there. The third concept was, it is without beginning and end, and natural law forbids that being should be other than perfectly complete. So, yeah, so it's not like we invented this stuff. Right? And actually, if I did it justice, the Hindus 1,000 years earlier were talking about the same stuff. So, and the fourth aspect, he tells us about thinking, creating reality, huh? He says, thinking and the object of thought are the same. Sounds to me like the law of correspondence or the law of mental equivalence. And he goes on and says, for you will not find thought apart from being, nor either of them apart from utterance. And why is utterance important? Because that's speaking your word into the law and creating reality for yourself, the way you want to see it. So that just defined the creative process that we teach each and every day here. He just defined the words that thoughts become things. So this is what Plato had to start with. So, you know, he had a rich tradition to start with, and Plato did a lot of writing about what Socrates said, and that's probably 2/3 of the writings of Plato. And Plato gave us some wisdom and very elegant language. I want to just touch on a couple of his classic works today. One is the Phaedo, and that's the definition of the soul and how the soul is immortal. And the second one is the Timaeus, and that's about how the Creator interacts with reality. So let's go to the first one, and the language is elegant because in this, to set this up, the setting is when Socrates was sentenced to death. He had to swallow poison to die, and he's trying to console the people who are worried about him, and he's convincing them in 20 pages how the soul is immortal and how every good philosopher longs to separate the soul from the body. And to me, we can touch base with it on the way that how many times have we been trying to fix things in the material world, and only when we go within, we get the experience of our own soul, and it gives us peace, and it gives us resolution, and it gives us guidance. But this is what Plato said. He said, but when she examines the soul by herself, she goes away yonder to the pure, to the everlasting, to the immortal and the unchanging. And being akin to that, she abides ever with it, whenever it becomes possible for her to abide by herself. And there she rests from her wanderings. And while she is amongst these things, she is by herself unchanging, because she takes hold of what is unchanging, and this state of soul, separated from the body, has the name of wisdom. So that's the part where all through philosophy, the soul is apart from the body. It is immortal, and it goes beyond the body, and the body has its time and comes and goes, but the soul goes past that. And then the second work I want to talk about is the Timaeus. And the Timaeus was supposedly the book that was in every middle-aged library throughout the world. It was the most read and the most revered book. And it's all about the creative process and how the Creator interacts with reality. And remember what I talked about was the Platonic principle, the good, the one, the light, and the love, and how we relate to them and how we bring them into our spiritual practice, which are affirmations, and how blessed we were, believe me, I read all this, to have Ernest Holmes related to us in better language that's more easily understood. And in the Timaeus, I can summarize it, this is what it says about reality. What is perfectly good can accomplish only what is perfectly beautiful. This was and is a universal law. So that universal law is that good expands into reality. And as we turn to good, we experience that reality in our own lives. So the key points that I got out of the Timaeus is 3. First, that the nature of the Creator is good. Second, there is no beginning or no end. And lastly, that the Creator desired that all should be like himself as far as possible. I use the original words because it was a masculine wording back then. So that sets up an analogy, and philosophers love analogies because analogies are so important. They say, if it was like this in this case, we can apply it to this case. But that analysis, that this condition of likeness, if we're part of God, and that's what we say, we are in touch with God or Spirit. We're in touch with the light, the love. We become that love. And guess what Al pictures in our life? That love, that joy, that peace, that sense of abundance. So we're just using like 2,500-year-old stuff here. Yeah, so Ernest Holmes got all this, but I started to, I started to search Ernest Holmes, and one of the things I love is that I have my Ernest Holmes file now all electronically. And if I looked at good and the one and beauty, I had like 1,000 references and 2 books on Ernest Holmes, so he always went back to this. So, but the way I love to study Ernest Holmes is I love to study when the books are recording him talking rather than him writing a textbook and someone editing it. So I get the most out of that. So I was saying, well, why was Ernest so drawn to Plato? And the things I've said sort of tells you that it's obviously in his writings. But Ernest sort of appreciated a man by the name of Ralph Waldo Emerson. And Emerson said this. He says, only a few people in each age can understand Plato. But to every age, the works of Plato are brought and placed in the hands of these few, as though God himself had brought it. So, Ernest was pretty, thought a lot about his intellectual ability. So I could see Ernest thinking, well, I'm going to be one of these few. And he certainly read Plato and quoted Plato and brought us Plato, condensed in a way that we can use over and over again. So this is what he said about Plato, though, and these are what Ernest said. And it's good. I love to go read when he's talking about it, because this is what he really believes. And when you can talk about it off the cuff in a conversation, you're sort of what your true belief system comes out. He said this: Plato said that God is goodness, truth, and beauty. And he said, Plato said that everything is made up of divine ideas. Well, if God is truth and beauty, and God is the creator of the universe, the two and two go together. And this concept of divine ideas was something that Plato brought forward, that there was forms or images behind reality, and these divine ideas, once they were focused on, became reality for us. So he turned to this concept of the one, the light, and what happens is when you have the concept of the good, the beauty, the one, and the light, and you focus on, there's a concept called providence, and that's just what happens. As I say, when you remember who you are, providence is great things happen in your life because you're focusing on who you are, you're remembering who you are, not what you're seeing outside and not what other people are telling you. And so, in the same part when Ernest was talking about Plato, he had a very poignant conclusion about it, and it's a bit lengthy, but I want to read the whole thing. And Ernest says this: we are in the arms of a tenderness. We are in the atmosphere of a sweetness. We are in the presence of a light far beyond our dreaming. And in that light, there is no darkness. And as we take time to practice this presence, feel the depths of this peace, see the magnificence of this light and this life in each other, something awakens in us, and in its turn within those we meet, in the environment which we habituate. And gradually we are lifted from the lower rung of our own elevation on this earth, and we shall live here and now in the kingdom of God. So the challenge I have for each of you today is to understand and embrace this concept of this good, this one, this light. Because this story of good, the story of love, the story of light unfolds in our life. And How many of you have been in just a space you didn't know where to turn? And you look to that inside of you, something good, something powerful, and you didn't turn, look to the problem. Maybe the problem just overwhelmed you, and you had to go beyond there. You had to remember who you were. And sometimes the law of cause and effect had to throw things at you to remember who you were. But when you turn to this good, you turn to this light, you turn to the sense of oneness, you're turning to what Ernest told us and what he learned from very much people like Plato. So if we can, I'd like to end this talk on a prayer. So if you will, just join with me in consciousness. And just go within and reach that point where you truly understand who you are. You truly understand that you are good, you are all powerful, that there is a light, that you are in touch with the one. And being in touch with the one, you see the beauty of yourself, you see the beauty of those around you. And you just make a stand and you accept the providence that is here for you, right here and right now. And you know that it is good, and you know that you deserve it, and you know that is your life now. And for this wonderful life, Father, Mother, God, I just give thanks. I let it be, and I let it go. And so it is.